Looking for the quintessential European skiing experience? The Chamonix-Mont-Blanc region might be for you. With a wide range of slopes, extensive backcountry, and an incredible town, the area stands out with one of the most iconic alpine setups not just in France, but in the entire world. But if you do choose to visit Chamonix, there are a few factors that distinguish it from the vast majority of other ski destinations. So what do you need to know? Well, in this video, we'll go through the Chamonix-Mont-Blanc region's overall mountain experience, and then we'll go through how the area stacks up in our overall rankings. Let's jump in. If you're most familiar with the American ski scene, Chamonix can best be described as having the layout of Aspen, but on steroids. Rather than one massive destination resort, Chamonix is home to 5 major distinct ski areas, each of which are physically separate and, with just one exception, entirely lack lift connections between one another. These resorts span the length of the Chamonix Valley, and from west to east, they include Les Ouches, which is the lowest elevation of the resorts and the only one that offers a significant quantity of below treeline terrain, Brévent-Flégère, which are the closest resorts to downtown Chamonix and linked together by a cable car, Montets, which has the region's best exposure and most expert-oriented terrain, and Le Tour, which offers some of the nicest high alpine cruising terrain in the region. There's also one distinct beginner-oriented hill, Les Planards. This very small area only has 4 trails and sits right at the base of downtown Chamonix. In addition, the Aiguille du Midi cable car system, also based in town, serves backcountry ski terrain, including the famous Valleé Blanche descent. A big Chamonix downside, especially compared to some of its monumental nearby competitors, is that none of its individual resorts are particularly big. With piste-to-piste footprint sizes spanning from 385 acres for Brévent to around 1,000 acres for Le Tour, the Chamonix resorts offer substantially less continuously skiable terrain than places like Zermatt, Verbier, and Les Trois-Vallées. Even if you take all of the footprints and combine them, the full Chamonix boundary-to-boundary footprint is still less than half of the size of all of those aforementioned ski areas. And while they're located in the same valley, getting between many of these physically separate resorts takes both time and effort. From downtown Chamonix, it can take over half an hour to get to Le Tour, Les Ouches, and Grand Montets, and that's only if you time the bus right. The Chamonix Valley buses can run as infrequently as every half hour, and with a very confusing downtown stop system, you can easily end up loading a bus going in the wrong direction by accident. All these circumstances mean that you're not going to be able to practically hit more than one ski resort, with perhaps the exception of Brévent and Flégère, which are connected by a cable car, over the course of a single day. For many travelers, a singular, exceptionally large skiable footprint is a big draw for a destination ski trip to Europe, and in this respect, Chamonix does not deliver. But no matter which resort you go to, Chamonix makes up for these size deficiencies with its absolutely phenomenal scenery. The ski region is about as stunning as it gets anywhere, with the box canyon layout, exceptional mountain prominence, and iconic, jagged peaks making for striking landscapes in every direction. It's hard to understate just how beautiful Mont Blanc itself is, with a combination of glaciers, rock formations, and sheer height that make for a one-of-a-kind sight. All of Chamonix's major ski resorts offer views into the town and its outskirts, and seeing the way the developed town is built to integrate with its alpine environment, with the building lines basically being formed by the line of the foothills, is really quite a sight to behold. Chamonix sees decent snow totals for the Alps, but conditions vary substantially depending on which mountain you visit. While the region's accumulation numbers are nowhere near what one might expect from the Rocky Mountains of North America, Chamonix still does see occasional powder days that provide for some pretty awesome conditions. On the other hand, like other parts of the Alps, the region can go for days or even weeks without significant snow, which then results in thin cover and icy slopes. Chamonix's lowest trails bottom out below 1,000 meters, and the lowest elevation areas can sometimes see mixed accumulation or rain. On piste, guests will reliably find the best quality snow at Grand Montets, which faces north, sees higher raw snow totals than the other areas, and offers the highest elevation inbound skiing in the region. Le Tour also offers solid snow, with a decently high elevation and slopes that mainly face north and west. However, things start to get quite a bit more variable moving west in the valley. Despite similar, if not slightly better elevation levels to Le Tour, both Brévent and Flégère face south and east, making for sun-baked slopes and inconsistent conditions if it hasn't snowed in a while. Finally, Les Ouches doesn't have the worst exposure aspects, but it sits at a substantially lower elevation than the rest of the valley's resorts, making for a fraction of the snowfall the other resorts get, as well as occasional rain. At least Les Houches' below treeline footprint keeps it sheltered on storm days, and when it's snowing hard, it may be the only mountain open in the region. Speaking of storm days, with the exception of the aforementioned Les Houches, Chamonix's high elevation above treeline footprint results in significant operational impacts when weather events roll in. If there's a snowstorm going on, visibility at the resorts can dwindle to near zero levels, making it tough to enjoy much of anything up there. Combined with their substantial wind exposure, Chamonix's high alpine ski resorts may be subject to closing entirely during stormy conditions. It's also worth noting that if you happen to hit Chamonix on a fresh powder day, you may not be able to hit the entire mountain immediately. The resorts in the region take their sweet time to clear the slopes, and some mountain areas may not open until late morning or early afternoon the day after a storm. That being said, if you play your cards right, this circumstance can play to your advantage and allow you to get fresh tracks for several hours as resort staff go and gradually open each individual mountain area throughout the day. Finally, guests should be aware that some of Chamonix's lower mountain pistes are subject to opening schedules that, to put it lightly, are extremely variable. In recent years, untenable snow cover has meant that certain slopes, most notably the valley runs down from Brévent and Flégère, have not even opened at all. This circumstance effectively means that guests spending time at these two resorts will need to download the out-of-base gondolas to leave them. While there's nothing stopping visitors from ducking the rope and trying the valley runs anyway, those who do this should prepare for unskiable terrain about 2/3 of the way down and having to walk the rest of the way to the base. Chamonix is not the best ski region for beginners. The best major resort in the region for beginner terrain is probably Les Houches, which offers gentler blue-rated slopes off most of its lifts and tends to attract less aggressive skiers and riders than the other Chamonix ski resorts. The other resorts also offer some blue runs, but they're often limited in nature compared to pistes of harder difficulty levels, and they're generally on the steeper side for beginner runs. For true first-timers, Les Houches, Brévent, Flégère, and Le Tour all offer small learning areas consisting of green-rated pistes, as does the very small Les Planards area in town. Chamonix becomes a more compelling region at the intermediate level, although there are still better destinations out there for this ability. The Le Tour area is chock full of high alpine red cruisers with absolutely incredible views of the surrounding mountains, while Brévent, Flégère, and Grand Montets all have their share of distinct intermediate-rated pistes as well. Most of the reds at these mountains are above treeline, but a few do dip into tree-defined territory. For true below treeline red pistes, guests will want to head to Les Houches. But what you really want to be if you visit Chamonix is an experienced skier or rider. Unlike the vast majority of European ski resorts, the Chamonix Valley's mountains actually leave a sizable number of black runs ungroomed. This circumstance creates some very steep, demanding mogul runs, which is quite rare among ski areas on the European continent. Those looking for the hardest piste should head to Grand Montets, which is home to a large concentration of long, steep, and demanding ungroomed black runs. Guests will find a handful of solid advanced pistes at Brévent and Flégère as well, most notably the absolutely stunning Charles Bozon run from the Brévent summit. However, the black runs at these two resorts are groomed more often than those at Grand Montets. Le Tour and Les Houches are much tamer, and for the most part, they have very little on-piste terrain for advanced and expert winter sportsgoers. The advanced level of proficiency is also probably where guests should be to seriously consider a trip down the backcountry Vallée Blanche descent, even if one hires a guide. While large portions of this run do look like a typical red intermediate piste, this descent involves a dangerous hike down in a few places where navigating through narrow ice fields is required, neither of which any green, blue, or red piste will ever involve. It is worth noting though, that as of February 2024, there is no longer a hike required to get out of Vallée Blanche thanks to a new gondola connection. Speaking of backcountry, where Chamonix really stands out is in its lift-served off-piste terrain. The region's resorts are practically intertwined with the unpatrolled areas that surround them, with several areas directly off the sides of trails being ripe for skiing and riding. Unlike many other European Alps resorts, where the off-piste sees few to no tracks, Chamonix's off-piste attracts significant traffic. While this means that many of these unmaintained mountain areas actually get skied out rather quickly, it also results in a rather substantial amount of out-of-bounds mogul terrain. As a result, the region's black runs are not the only places where skiers and riders can test their mettle on bumps. At the vast majority of Chamonix region resorts, With Les Houches being the lone exception, guests can often cut directly onto off-piste mogul terrain from an on-piste red or black groomed run, making the region not just great for endurance junkies, but also awesome for those looking to progress into mogul terrain. For those who are looking for the gnarliest terrain, Chamonix off-piste provides an additional level of challenge versus its patrolled slopes. As with most European ski resorts, truly extreme on-piste terrain at Chamonix is limited. However, some lift-served off-piste chutes, cliffs, and couloirs exist and provide serious challenges. For those looking to earn their turns, an extensive selection of hike-to off-piste areas can be found across the region as well. But while Chamonix off-piste is utilized a lot more frequently than that of other nearby ski regions, this type of terrain is subject to the same dangers as out-of-bounds terrain everywhere else. Except when needed to keep traditional pistes safe, the off-piste is not patrolled or maintained for avalanches, meaning that those who venture off the slopes are doing so at their own risk. As a result, we highly recommend checking the avalanche forecasts, bringing proper backcountry gear such as a beacon and shovel, and going with a partner or guide if you plan to do any terrain that's not on an official ski trail. Chamonix lift-served off-piste is a nice feature, but despite the Alps' reputation for fast, modern lifts, the uphill infrastructure at Chamonix ski resorts is somewhat behind the times. On the plus side, some areas, including most out-of-base entry points, are served by gondolas or high-speed chairlifts. In addition, some guests will find it pretty cool that access to the Brévent bunny hill comes from a unique funicular. However, some fairly significant terrain zones are still held down by slow, fixed-grip chairlifts or platter lifts. A few areas, including the top of Brévent, the secondary base at Les Houches, and the connection between Brévent and Flégère, are served by aerial trams. These tramways are physically speedy, but their low capacity can cause long lines when it's busy. In addition, when it's not busy in Chamonix, the resorts in the region often wait for the tram cars to fill up before starting the lift. This can mean waiting at the bottom for a protracted period of time before the lift starts moving. It's also worth noting that Chamonix has been taking their sweet time with a notable lift investment. The upper mountain tram to the top of Grand Montets burned down about a decade ago, and despite preliminary plans, this lift still hasn't been replaced. As a result, the top 500 meters of Grand Montets, which comprise a piste-to-piste area of nearly a third of the resort, has not been lift-served or patrolled since then. Lift service will finally be restored here in late 2025 at the earliest. Speaking of waits, Chamonix lift lines vary depending on the resort, but the region is well known, and it can get quite busy during peak times. During the winter vacation periods in Western European countries, which usually include the December holiday and a few weeks in mid-February, the resorts closest to the town of Chamonix can get especially packed. Due in large part to its entry portal location directly in town, guests should expect the biggest crowds at Brévent during busy times, while the interconnected Flégère and intermediate-focused Latour can get pretty hectic as well. The Chamonix region suffers from a general lack of lift redundancies, so if you end up in a bad lift line to get from one area to another, there's little to do besides just waiting it out. Additionally, since the valley trails to leave Brévent and Flégère are essentially never open, guests will face waits to download the gondolas to leave the resorts at the end of the day too. With the exception of a dedicated ski school line, Chamonix lift line management is essentially non-existent, so you pretty much have to fight for your spot in line as you're waiting throughout the day. Thankfully, besides the aforementioned circumstances when it comes to leaving the resorts in the late afternoon, and a few situations where a powder day may cause certain lift closures or an unusual rush in local traffic, lift lines are rarely an issue during off-peak times. The on-mountain facilities at Chamonix ski areas will generally impress those visiting from across the pond. However, the resort's lodges and restaurants aren't quite as exceptional as that of some European competitors. Facilities are well placed at most resorts, but it can take a bit of planning to reach them. And since many of the restaurants are locally owned, they aren't subject to the most reliable opening schedules. The biggest frustration comes at Brévent, where it can take up to 2 lift rides to get to the nearest lodge, which is really uncommon at top-tier European destination resorts. Getting around at Chamonix individual ski resorts is generally easier than doing so at prominent competitors, thanks in large part to their smaller sizes. The region's signage isn't perfect. Certain mountain areas, especially at Brévent and parts of Les Houches, could use more trail maps spread around the resort. Still, signage is a lot more clear and intuitively designed than at many competitors, and after a day or two on the mountain, it's pretty straightforward to figure out how to get to certain trails, lifts, terrain zones, and restaurants. Chamonix mountains often experience low visibility conditions when storms roll through, but in order to keep guests in bounds, the resorts include poles on the sides of each trail to mark the edges of where they start and end. These posts are colored to indicate the difficulty level of the slope, and the left and right boundary sticks have slightly different designs to help guests ensure they remain on the correct side of them. It's also worth noting that Chamonix has a system to help guests keep track of exactly how far they've made it down a piste, with a series of number signs indicating the distance from the end of the trail. Due in large part to their lack of integration with downtown Chamonix, the resorts in the region do not have as extensive of an après-ski scene as at some other European mountains. Still, visitors can find post-slopes fun at all of Chamonix's major resorts, with bars at the majority of on-mountain establishments, outdoor seating to soak in the sun, and additional low-key but enjoyable venues at the base towns. While the ski areas themselves may not be the liveliest on the continent, the town of Chamonix is one of the most spectacular in Europe. Rather than many competing ski towns, which were built and commercialized specifically to attract tourists, the town of Chamonix is an authentic settlement, with a large community of locals who truly live there year-round. This makes for a more down-to-earth vibe than one might get at other European destinations. Combined with the awe-inspiring mountains boxing in the sides of the town, many visitors will find it hard to envision a more beautiful place to spend a night in. Once in downtown Chamonix, visitors will find a much more extensive selection of nightlife than at the resorts. While it's not quite as rowdy as some other European ski towns, there's still plenty to do. A range of bars and restaurants in town offer great happy hour vibes and fantastic food, with options ranging from casual beer joints and hole-in-the-wall kebab shops to fancy Michelin star restaurants. While Chamonix is in France, the town actually has some incredible pizza, which begins to make a lot more sense once you remember just how close the town is to the Italian border. For dancing and live music, there are plenty of venues downtown, with some staying open well into the night. But perhaps the most extraordinary nightlife experience in Chamonix is at the Valleé du Hotel. Both hotel guests and members of the public can go and watch incredible dance, music, and improv performances on a nightly basis in the common spaces, and to top it all off, the entire spectacle is free. Speaking of spending the night, downtown Chamonix and its surrounding valley towns are home to an extensive selection of lodging options, although during peak times, accommodations do book up. Travelers can find stays ranging from budget hostels, some of which don't even have sheets on beds or complimentary towels, to ultra-luxury 5-star hotels downtown. Those who want to go with a bigger group can find a range of home rentals within the valley too. When it comes to getting to Chamonix, most guests coming by plane will want to fly through Geneva, which is approximately an hour and a half away by road. Public bus transportation is widely available from both the airport and downtown Geneva, and tickets are very cheap by ski town standards. Chamonix is also served by a train service, which provides convenient access to and from parts of central Switzerland. The train can be a great option for those planning to stop by ski resorts in the Swiss Alps. While visitors can take this train service directly between Geneva and Chamonix, this route is both more expensive and longer than the bus option, so there's very little reason to do so. Chamonix-Mont-Blanc has increased in popularity with North Americans in recent years, and a big reason for this is its inclusion on the Ikon and Mountain Collective passes. These two popular multi-resort pass products provide access to dozens of ski areas around the world. Full Ikon pass holders get 7 days of access to be shared across Grand Montets, Les Ouches, Les Tours, Brévent, and Flégère, while the Base and Base Plus pass holders get 5 days of access. Mountain Collective pass holders get 2 days in the Chamonix Valley and 50% off the lift ticket rate for any additional days. With the exception of Les Ouches, Ikon pass guests visiting Chamonix can ski or ride right onto the lifts without getting the pass activated at the ticket window. In addition, unlike with many North American resorts, there are no holiday blackouts for Chamonix on the Ikon base pass products. However, it is important to note that the Les Planards beginner area, the Aiguille du Midi tram network, and the Alpine railway systems around the region are not included on the Ikon Pass, and access for these areas must be purchased separately. On the other hand, with the exception of Les Planards, these attractions are included on the Mountain Collective Pass. One other thing to note, Chamonix is not included on the day ticket like Ikon's Session Pass product. So Chamonix-Mont-Blanc isn't for those looking for the biggest skiable footprint or the nicest restaurants. But if you want to ski or ride some of the most stunning slopes in the world and love your mogul terrain, there are a few destinations that can match. Chamonix lift tickets are a bit pricey for Europe, but they're still an absolute steal compared to North American resorts, with one-day window rates for the Mont Blanc Unlimited ticket, which offers access to all the resorts, alpine lifts, and cog railways in the Chamonix Valley, topping out at just 83 euros. You can get an even cheaper ticket rate if you don't want to visit Les Ouches or you don't care about riding the highest elevation lifts at Grand Montets. While the region is included on Ikon and Mountain Collective, these passes are really only worth getting if you plan on doing a week or more at ski resorts in North America as well. One thing to note, lift tickets and pass products do not come with ski patrol services, so on-mountain insurance needs to be purchased as an extra cost add-on for €3.50 per day. If you plan to go off-piste, this on-mountain insurance may not cover that, so you may want to look into third-party plans. Now let's go through how the Chamonix region resorts stack up in our overall rankings, which are determined by the following 10 category mountain score. Since Grand Montets, Les Tours, Les Ouches, and Brévent-Flégère are physically separate areas, we've decided to score each of them individually rather than one major area. Chamonix's accumulation numbers are respectable for the Alps, but snow conditions vary substantially depending on the mountain, and the region gets a 7 in this category at Grand Montets, a 6 in this category at Les Tours and Brévent-Flégère, and a 5 in this category at Les Ouches. Chamonix resorts are reasonably reliable when it comes to north-facing and upper mountain terrain, but the region's lowest elevations see quite variable openings, with some south-facing valley trails that are almost never open. On the other hand, the heavily exposed upper mountain slopes can see wind and storm holds. The region gets a 7 for resiliency at Grand Montets, a 6 in this category at Les Tours, a 5 in this category at Les Ouches, and just a 4 in this category at Brévent-Flégère. If counting Brévent-Flégère as one continuous area, from boundary piste to boundary piste, the major Chamonix Valley resorts span in size from 675 acres for Grand Montets to approximately 1,000 acres for each of Les Ouches, Les Tours, and Brévent-Flégère, earning the region a 4 for size at Grand Montets and a 5 for size at each of the other interconnected ski areas. The Chamonix region as a whole has a pretty varied selection of terrain, although each individual mountain tends to specialize in somewhat specific types of slopes, and the region gets an 8 for terrain diversity at Brévent-Flégère, a 7 at Grand Montets, a 6 at Les Tours, and a 5 at Les Ouches. Chamonix's ungroomed black runs make it an incredible destination for endurance runs, and some lift-served off-piste is truly extreme, with the expert-oriented Grand Montets earning a 9 for challenge, the off-piste heavy Brévent-Flégère earning a 7 in this category, and the less intense Les Tours and Les Ouches earning a 5 and 4 in this category, respectively. Chamonix's lift system is a mixed bag, and every resort has a mix of high-speed lifts, slow, fixed-grip chairs, and surface lifts. But some mountains are better than others, and the region gets an 8 for lifts at Grand Montets, a 7 in this category at Les Tours, a 6 in this category at Brévent-Flégère, and a 4 in this category at Les Ouches. Crowd flow in Chamonix can be a mixed bag during peak times, with the resorts closest to downtown Chamonix being impacted the most. The region gets a 6 for crowd flow at Brévent-Flégère, a 7 at each of Grand Montets and Les Tours, and a 9 at the much less popular Les Ouches. Chamonix's on-mountain facilities are good but not world-class, and the region gets a 7 in this category at Grand Montets, a 6 at Les Ouches, and a 5 at both Brévent-Flégère and Les Tours. The Chamonix ski resorts are easier to get around than a lot of other European mountains, but there are a few complicated situations and places that could use somewhat better signage. The low elevation Les Ouches is perhaps the most complicated resort to get around due to a weirdly laid out lift network, and the region gets a 5 for navigation at Les Ouches and a 6 for navigation at all the other resorts. And finally, mountain aesthetic. No matter which resort you visit, Chamonix is one of the most stunning regions to ski or ride in the world. The valley's 3 high alpine interconnected resorts earn our highest score of 10 in this category, while the mellower, below treeline Les Ouches still gets a 9. These categories add up to overall scores of 72 for Grand Montets, 63 at Brévent-Flégère, 63 at Les Tours, and 57 at Les Ouches as of mid-2024. Despite being individually smaller than competitors like Les Trois Valleé, Verbier, and Zermatt, the Chamonix resorts still put up a compelling fight against these destinations thanks to their stunning surroundings and demanding slopes. Brévent-Flégère, Les Tours, and Les Ouches aren't the most compelling destinations on their own, but combined, they have their own strengths that complement each other well. Grand Montets is still suffering from its current lack of a summit lift, and come the replacement lift's installation in late 2025, we could see the resort become even more competitive than it is now. Still, Those who are looking for a family-friendly European destination with seemingly endless slopes may want to look elsewhere. If you found this information helpful, be sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any of our content. For more information on Chamonix and over 100 destination ski resorts around the world, check out peakrankings.com. See you for the next one.